Menahel, the principal of Yeshivat Yavneh in Paramus, and a good friend of the family. Please give your undivided attention. Again, please have in mind the brachot and the limud Torah is Le'ilui Nishmat Yisrael Amichai ben Sara.
Okay, so Shavua Tov, everyone. On behalf of my wife, Leah, and myself, we consider it a real kavod to be here with this family. I just sat down and I apologize, we didn't get to exchange names too long. I'm Jonathan.
David.
So David and I were speaking for a minute or two before we got started, and David asked me, so how do I know the family? And I think it's a really interesting story. Maybe I'll come back to it a little bit more towards the end. Even the way that we met was rather unique. So, only about 2.5 years ago, and I don't think I have this type of friendship or relationship with any other family that I know for really only a short period of time. You're welcome, and it's a warm feeling between our families.
It definitely is. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure.
It's probably one of the great pleasures that Leah and I have had the zechut over the past 2.5 years. So Yosef and Shmuel and Amichai, besides helping us with our home with such class and precision and yashrus, which was so very unique, our families met on a random Shabbat 2.5 years ago in a hotel in the Catskills, and our families were sort of looking at each other the whole time. We were the only big families there. So I was there with my mother and her husband and my brother and his family, and your family was there. And we started talking, and maybe I'll come back to a little bit later on. So I think that's one reason that I'm here, what's happened in the last 2.5 years. Shmuel and I were talking, and I was reflecting with Shmuel a little bit of my own life story, and Shmuel said maybe it'd be appropriate that I share it for a minute. And I was very young when my own father passed away. I was 5 years old, and my family did not talk about it much. And only about 15 years ago, I was being Menachem Ovo with a family in our school who lost a parent, and spending time with them. And I came for Nichem Avelim, and sometime during that Shiva visit, the father who was sitting Shiva, it was pointed out to him by somebody else that I lost a parent, and he said to me at the time, that gives me a lot of nechama. And I didn't understand it. And I said, how so? He said, I see that you seem, Baruch Hashem, to have a family, and you have a happy life, and you have a job, and you have a wonderful wife, and you have children. And he said to me, this nechama is something that you don't realize. And I didn't realize it. And so he helped me to understand that better. So in that sense, I come with a sort of a second goal, is to always provide some aid in the chava. So I prepared this year. Yosef, normally I teach kids your age. I don't normally teach people that are so much bigger than me. So I prepared some Marbakalot that I thought we could study and learn together. So I'll pass them around. You can pass them towards the back. I'll wait a minute or two. You can pass them around. The idea of the topic that I was thinking about and speaking with Shmuel a little bit was to try to take a little bit of a deeper look at the word simcha as it appears in the Torah and as it appears in the Rambam. There's only one sheet, it's back to back, it's on two sides. So we know this time of the year there's a lot of talk about simcha. People famously sing the song, Misha Niknas Adar, Marbim Simcha. So everyone talks about simcha when it comes to Adar. So the original source for that famous song is a Gemara in Tainus. I'll try to say Ta'anit. If I slip, you'll please excuse me. Gemara says the first source, Meshanichnas Av Mema'atim V'Simcha. When the month of Av comes, of course, we lessen the Simcha. Amar Rav Yehuda Bereda Rav Shmuel Bar Shila B'Shmei Rav. Just like when Av comes, we lessen the Simcha. Kishem Shemishenichnas Av Mematim B'Simcha Kach Mishenichnas Adar Marbim B'Simcha. This is Meshi with some extra notes on it. So the first thing that I thought was interesting is the Gemara doesn't tell us when Av comes that there's no Simcha. Gemara doesn't say when Av comes we eliminate Simcha. We minimize simcha. So it seems to me there's always some idea of simcha, but it really extends itself during the month of Adar. So then we ask, where in Adar are we supposed to find the chance to elevate the simcha? So most obviously we would think about Purim. So I copied for us to look at together the Rambam Hilchos Megillah. The Rambam before that talks about when the mitzvah of Sudas Purim is supposed to take place. And then the Rambam writes, this one came up with Nikud. I'm not sure why exactly. The Nikud might be exactly correct, might not be. Ketzad Chovat Su'udazu. What is the obligation? How do we fulfill this mitzvah? Rambam tells us, Sheyochol Basar, V'yatakin Suda Na'eh, Kafi Asher Timsa Yado. You have to eat meat, you have to prepare a nice Suda according to your means. V'shote Yayin Ad Sheis Taker, famous Rambam. V'yei Radem B'shichruto. You have to drink to your heart's content until you actually get drunk, let's call it, and then you fall asleep through this drunken state. So the first idea the Rambam seems to articulate for us is the mitzvah of the Sudan Purim is to drink, to eat meat, to drink wine, to get drunk. Seems to be purely a physical experience, festive, frivolity, lightheadedness, and that's the idea of the Rambam in Hilchot Megillah. The Rambam in Hilchot Yantav presents for us a very, very different idea. In fact, it's so different, it's going to be almost hard for us to reconcile this. And now, here's where I apologize because the sheets get interesting, and I'm going to explain what happened. At least I'm going to try. I'm sort of tech savvy, I'm not so bad, but I have a friend who's much better than me, and I asked this friend to help me prepare the Mar Makomot. It's my fault for not reviewing them as carefully as I wanted to Erev Shabbat, because they looked fine at the first printing. But here's what we need to do. I'm going to ask you to be creative. The Rambam in source 3 is actually the beginning of source 4. So stick your pointer finger on source 4 for the beginning, because that really belongs at the beginning of source 3. Kisha Adam Ochel V'Shota V'Samach Beregel. This is, again, Rambam Hilchos Yantiv. Lo Yimshach B'Yayin. Ubis Achok V'Kalo Rosh. A person is not supposed to overindulge in wine and frivolity and lightheadedness. Vayomer, he shouldn't say, now jump back please if you don't mind to source 3. He shouldn't say, Shekol mi sheyosif bazeh yarba b'mitzvat simcha. Don't say, V'chol amar b'harizem mishubach. So Sukkot comes, Pesach comes. We're not supposed to say, hey, the mitzvah is to drink wine, bring it on, let's have more, keep indulging, more wine, more meat. The Rambam says if you think that's the idea of Simchas Yantiv, you have it all wrong. She'ashichrus v'sachok harbe v'kalot harosh eino simcha, says the Rambam. That's not simcha. You think you're having a good time? Let's not confuse ourselves. And the Rambam goes on, he describes that this is silliness and this is anything very, very far from simcha. And if you continue the Rambam, the real simcha has to involve what he calls avodat yotzer kol. It has to involve some type of avodah v'kadosh baruch hu. So Purim, the Rambam says, drink, have a good time, be drunk, enjoy yourself. When it comes to Hilchos Yantav, it seems to be exactly the opposite. To bring this a little bit further, let's look at the Rambam Hilchos Chanukah. So there the Rambam describes there are essentially 18 days a year. There's a mitzvah to say halot, the famous Rambam. We're going to start where we left off. It's the end of the first line of the fourth source. V'lo halal shel Chanukah bilvad hu midivrei sofrim. Chanukah, the halal Chanukah is not the only halal that's divrei sofrim. Ela kriyas halal la'olam midivrei sofrim. B'chol hayomim shen gomrim behem et halal. Whenever we have a mitzvah to recite the complete Hallel, it's a mitzvah midivrei sofrim. That's not our topic for now. And now the Rambam enumerates the days. What are the days? Shemona Asar Yom B'Shana, mitzvah ligmor behem et Hallel. Eluhein. Shmona Yimei Achag, 8 days of Sukkot. Shmona Yimei Chanukah, 8 days of Chanukah. Rishon Shal Pesach, of course this is talking about in Eretz Yisrael. V'Yom Atzeret, and 1 day of Shavuot. Now again, we're going to get a little creative, I beg your indulgence, but let's take a look at the end of this Rambam. Aval, Rosh Hashanah, V'yom HaKippurim, Ein Bahem, now go to the line right below us where it says Hallel, in the middle of the line. Again, I don't know what exactly happened, but obviously it's my fault because I prepared the sheet. So, Ein Bahem Hallel, Lefi Shehein Yimei Teshuvah, V'yira Upachad, Lo Yemei, now jump back to the middle of the line. This is how the Rambam really reads. If you don't believe me, I brought it with me, so I can prove it. Lo Yemei Simcha Yateva. So the Rambam tells us we don't read Hallel and Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur because they don't have Simcha Yateva. But they have Simcha. They don't have Simcha Yateva, but there's some element of Simcha. To make this even a little bit sharper, there's an opinion of the Rosh at the end of Rosh Hashanah, which I didn't copy, where the Rosh has a whole discussion of should there be the language, and I copied it here in source 5, V'tit lan Roshem Elokeinu ba'ahava, mo'adim l'simcha, Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. And in fact, if you look back at Machzorim, I don't know exactly if it's in the, it's in the Ashkenazi Machzorim, but 400 or 500 years ago, you'll find evidence that in Yom Kippur, they added this tefillah mo'adim l'simcha even in Yom Kippur. So it's a real pella. How can it be that according to the Rambam, there's some element of simcha in Yom Kippur if we want to pretend that simcha is somehow an extension of basar and yayin? And we see it even made itself into our davening. So really, what do we see from here? The conventional definition that many people have of simcha needs to be entirely redefined. If we want to say that simcha equals basar or simcha equals yayin, it can't be. Certainly not in Yom Kippur. And the Rambam even says, if you think that's your experience to be misamech on the Shlosh Regalim, you have it all wrong according to the Rambam. So if that's not simcha, so then we have to ask ourselves, what is simcha? How are we now going to have, hopefully, a new understanding of simcha that might help us in a few other ways? So there are many, many psukim in Chumash that one can find the mitzvah of simcha juxtaposed to the words Lifnei Hashem. There are many, many examples. I copied 2. I copied one in Emor and one in Re'eh. So they both have to do, obviously, with the Shlosh Regalim. The first one is the mitzvah of the Dalim Midim. Ulekachtem lechem b'yom harishon, priyei todar, kapot tamarim, anafei tavot, arvei nachal, v'simachtem, lifnei Hashem Elokeichem. And if you look many, many times in the Torah, simcha and being lifnei Hashem go hand in hand. The next source that I copied, which expresses a similar idea, v'simachta lifnei Hashem Elokecha, Parshat Re'eh, the idea of v'samachta b'chagecha also means being lifnei Hashem. So now we want to understand if being b'simcha, is it basar v'yan? What is it? So the idea that I want to sort of share with you tonight is an idea that's developed in a few places by Rabbi Soloveitchik. And he says that simcha is an awareness of being in front of a Kadosh Baruch Hu. That along with simcha is some type of, we'll call it an inner awareness, an inner tranquility, a life approach that at all times we're walking lifnei Hashem. One of the hard ways to understand some of these psukim otherwise would be actually in a way sometimes problematic. We can ask God, how can you tell me how to feel? How can you mandate an emotion? How can God say, today is Tet Vav Tishrei, feel happy? And it's hard because we have emotions, and our emotions sometimes may not be feeling happy. Our emotions might feel elsewise. With this new understanding of simcha, the mitzvah of simcha is not necessarily to be happy. It's an awareness of I'm now in the presence of a Kadosh Baruch Hu. I think if we now use, how am I doing time-wise, by the way?
Great.
Doing Beseder?
Okay.
I'm sensitive to that.
Very good.
Okay. No one's besimcha if the rabbi goes too long. Then I know.
It's 6 o'clock, don't worry.
6 o'clock in the morning?
6 o'clock is Nate's tomorrow morning.
It's Vasikin here.
Vasikin.
Okay.
Yeah, but till then.
So there's a very unusual, it's a long Mishnah on the 9th parak of Brachot, and tucked away in that Mishnah are a few words that are very, very difficult to understand. The Mishnah tells us, Chayev Adam, we're now in source 8, Levarech al hara, kishem shemavarech al tova. So there's an obligation, the Mishnah says, that we're supposed to say a bracha on things that are difficult, that are hard, that are unfortunate, that are considered not good, kishem, just like we make a bracha on something that's good. It's almost an impossible mission to understand. How are we supposed to make sense of this? Number one, the brachot are entirely different. They're different brachot. The brachot on something good is a tova meitiv. It's not the same bracha altogether. And more so, the equation, we'll call it in the Mishnah, seems to say kishem, just like. How is it supposed to be just like? It's impossible for us. I think if we want to extend this idea from the Rav, it can maybe help us understand this Mishnah in a better light. Chayev Adam levarech al hara kishem shevarech al tova means we understand that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is in charge of our lives. And the same way HaKadosh Baruch Hu blesses us with tova, and we're exceptionally grateful, Hashem presents us with incredible challenges. And it's not the same. Our feelings about them are not the same. Our emotions about them are not the same. Our awareness about them, the Mishnah tells us, we have to work on it to be the same. Our awareness that whatever happens in our lives, both the challenges that we have and the brachot that we have, in a way that we don't understand, happen from Hashem in the same way. I want to share with you the final idea. Is actually a really, I think, beautiful and incredible idea that relates to Purim Katan, and I want to use it to sort of tie together the few different ideas we talked about today. The first Mishnah, the halacha, in Shulchan Aruch, Orach Chaim Siman Aleph, the halachot of what we're supposed to do is wake up in the morning. So it's a famous song, many of us know it. Yitgaber Karila Mod Baboker Lavoda Boro. Supposed to wake up with energy, with excitement to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We're not supposed to mention tomorrow 6 o'clock in the morning, even if we're not, for whatever reason, davening with the tzibur. We're supposed to try our best to daven. At the same time, the tzibur davens. I hope there's a later minyan for all of us, but 6 o'clock is very early. The Ramah adds, again, you'll see it in many shuls, Shaviti Hashem lenegdi tamid. At all times, to have this idea that we're always right in front of a HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We always place Hashem right in front of us. So hold that thought for a couple of minutes and look for a moment at the last halacha, Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim, the very, very end of Orach Chaim, the halachot of Purim Katan, right? Just had Purim Katan. So there's different halachot, what you're supposed to do on Purim Katan. Do you say tachanan, do you not say tachanan, etc. You're supposed to have a suda, not have a suda. So machloket, yes suda, no suda. Look at the very, very end. So the Ramah again tells us we're now towards the end. We'll do Yesh Omrim. Yesh Omrim shechayv laharbo b'mishta u'b'simcha b'yud dalid sheba adar rishon, according to Torah. Ve'ein nogan kain. It's not our minhag. Last week there's no absolute mitzvah to have an absolute suda on Purim Katan. Mikol makom yarbek tzat b'suuda kedei letzeit yedei hamachmirim. It's a nice idea. Many people have the idea to have a little bit of a nicer suda in case there really is an idea to have a mitzvah of suda on Purim Katan. And the last 4 words of Orach Chaim, tov leiv mishta tamid. So I want to make a gezer shava from the first halacha and last halacha, tamid. Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim begins with tamid. Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim ends with tamid. It's a very interesting idea. So how do we try to understand tamid? So I think the idea very well could be that if we're able to live a life, Shaviti Hashem lenegdi tamid, then we're always tov leiv mishta tamid. That if we're able to live this life where we're always feeling we're walking together with the HaKadosh Baruch Hu, tov leiv mishta tamid. Mishta tamid, I really want to replace mishta tamid, simcha tamid. And when I was thinking about the shir, and Shmuel asked me what I could talk about tonight, So I thought about this idea of simcha, and I thought about tamid, and it brought me back to the first time our families met. So I don't know if you remember. You do. We had a good time together that Shabbos. For those who weren't there, we spent Shabbat in late summer in the Catskills. It was a program. It was about 100 people there, minyanim, shiurim, Shabbat meals. So there were many tables there with a few people. There were two large tables, the Avrahami table and our family's table. We were sort of next to each other. Both of our tables were a little bit loud, which was okay, a little bit leibedik. And when it came down to the very end of the weekend, the Sunday morning after Minyan, they had a little buffet. Of course, there's a guy making omelets. And Yisrael, Amichai and I were standing on the omelet line next to one another. And I was thinking of Simcha. I was thinking of his absolute Simchat HaChaim. And I think his midah of being Mikabel Kol Adam B'Simcha made it comfortable for me. I think otherwise, why would I go to somebody? I didn't know him, he didn't know me, we're talking, we don't have a friendship, we don't have a relationship, but he made me feel safe, and he made me feel comfortable. So we said Shalom Aleichem, and we said hi to each other, and we just started talking. Tell me about your family, tell me about my family, what do you do, what do you do? He gave me a card, Lay and I called, and then we started to become friends. And I really credit our entire relationship by his warmth and his closeness and his friendliness, and because he was Tamid B'Simcha. I really feel that he was Tamid B'Simcha.
He was always to everybody.
Everybody.
Everybody. Just recently we received the letter, which was addressed to Yosef for his bar mitzvah, and this was a friend of his from yeshiva. It's not in the same class, but in the same shiur, the different one. And he was telling a whole story about how Amichai, befriended him, and at night that everybody else more in the shiur was they were all fasting. They didn't want to learn, and Amichai, asked him to come over, and they spent 2 hours learning. This is how Amichai was all the time. It was everybody.
It was a contagious simcha.
No Hashem.
I think you couldn't be in his presence and not feel it. So to me, when I think about simcha, I think part of his simcha was an awareness that it was a tranquility, it was an experience that he knew he was walking with the Kadosh Baruch Hu and everything that he did. It was our experience with your family. We would sit together. Sometimes we would share Divrei Torah. We would look up Perek Tehillim. We would look up a pasuk, and then towards the end, Amichai was starting to not feel well already. He didn't want to complain. He wanted to push through, and he was always a professional. I think what your family does to me is incredible. Even this gathering here, what you're doing tonight, to me is so inspiring and it's so unique. I've never experienced this before. Yosef, I think you probably realize this is unique. I don't know families like your family. It's really incredible.
Thank you.
If I can add one other element why I think this is so special. I remember my family not doing this experience for different reasons, and how wonderful it is for you and your siblings, and as you get older, to continue to talk about the great legacy of your father. I saw that Sara was back there, and I know there are many other siblings I didn't get to meet yet, but the fact that your family talks about your father's legacy, it was such a beautiful legacy, remains a legacy of simcha, of chavrut, and of tamid, a legacy that of always being tamid b'simcha, and to always live up to that legacy, because you carry that legacy. It's a legacy that you should be proud of, that I know your father would be proud of, and I know your entire family carries on that legacy. To the members of the family that came to learn tonight, and to the friends that came to continue to remember all the great attributes that we all learned from Amichai, and that we continue to bring in our lives, it should be a continued nechamer to the family, and for zechut and aliyah for his neshama.
Amen.
Amen. Erzähl mir das, Baruch, das ist auch ein
Sag mir das, Rabbi,